Hello there my lovely fellow bookworms, it is Katie here from the Queen of Teen Fiction, and it is time to tell you all the books that I've been reading throughout August. So first up we have Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and this is a collaboration between J.K. Rowling, John Tiffany and Jack Thorne. This book is a script of a play that follows on from Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. It follows Harry's son Albus in Hogwarts as he struggles to come to terms with the pressures of being Harry Potter's son. I don't want to talk too much about this in my wrap up because I do have a discussion video that I plan to upload really soon, and I feel like I've been discussing it so much because of that video. It was literally an hour and 13 minutes worth of footage that I have had to edit down. It's been a nightmare. So I don't really want to go through explaining this all over again, but just a quick summary of my thoughts on it. I didn't want to have very high expectations going into it because I knew it was going to be different with it being a play and with it not just being written by J.K. Rowling. So I knew the characters wouldn't be the ones that I remember. I knew things would be a little bit messed up, so I went into it with low expectations and I ended up really enjoying it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I had a few issues here and there, but overall I just tried to ignore some of the wild plots and plot holes and just enjoy the dialogue and the characters, and that's exactly what I did. So the next book that I read is a book that I've been meaning to read for such a long time and finally got round to it, and it is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. So I'd heard from several other people that this book was really fantastic and I had been meaning to get my hands on it, and so for my birthday 2 months ago I finally got to go and buy a few books, and this was one of the ones that I got. I've been reading it since then, but little bits at a time because I've had a lot of other books to read. So I was reading this of a night for over the course of like a month. So usually I get through books really quickly. This was a stretched out period of being with this book and these characters and being immersed in this world. So I ended up getting really attached, and now that I'm not reading them each night, I am missing them a lot. But I know the second and final book is out at the end of September, so I'm very much looking forward to that. This book is quite difficult to condense into a short summary because there's just so much going on. It's a very action-packed fantasy novel, but it is about a very well-known criminal, Kaz Brecker. He's built up his own little world of fellow crooks, but in this book Kaz is offered the chance to go on a heist beyond anything he's ever done before. And that task is to break into a very well-known and secure prison called the Ice Court. In that prison is a scientist who knows a formula for a very powerful drug that could unleash so many horrors onto the world, and Kaz is offered a lot of money to do this. So he gets this very varied team together to help him break into this impossible prison. There are 6 members of this team, each of them are very different to the other. There's also a lot of tension between some of the characters, so it makes for a very exciting read. There is literally never a dull moment, there is always something going on. So the book is told in third person from the point of view of 5 of the main 6 characters. The only thing that disappointed me a little was that I really liked the character of Jesper and I was interested to learn a lot more about him, but it seemed to focus on him a little bit less than the others. His chapters seemed shorter and they seemed less personal. When it was following Kaz or Nina, it seemed to go more into their backstories and tell you more about who they were. Whereas with Jesper, I felt like we only got little hints about him and his life. I don't know whether that's because there's going to be a lot more about him in the next book. But yeah, I was just really intrigued by him and wanted to know more about him. But yeah, all of the characters are really great. There wasn't any of them that I didn't like. So I'm thrilled that I've finally picked up this book. And now I only have a month to wait until the next one. And I thought when I went into this that it was going to be a trilogy. And I thought, yay, I'm gonna hang around in this fandom for a little while. I'm gonna have at least another year waiting for a third and final book. Wrong! It's a duology, the next book is the last book, so I have a month to prepare myself for their final fate. But yeah, it is really great, and if you love high fantasy then definitely pick this one up. The next book that I read in August is Nothing Tastes as Good by Claire Hennessy. I read this with my fellow members of the book club, whose Facebook page I will leave a link to in the description in case you're interested in joining in. Each month we have a book to read and discuss, and this was the book for August. As you can probably tell by the cover, it is about food. More specifically, an unhealthy relationship with food. It is told from the perspective of a girl named Annabelle who lost her life to anorexia. In order for her to pass a message on to her family, she has to be a spirit guide for another girl named Julia. Annabelle has never accepted that her anorexia was an illness. She sees it as a choice and as a lifestyle. Julia is not what society would class as slim. So because of Annabelle's relationship with food, she automatically assumes that that is Julia's problem, and she tries to help her by encouraging Julia to lose weight. I found this book very difficult to read at times because Annabelle's narration is quite cruel with regards to weight and food. But I think this book needed to be told through her perspective. I found it really interesting that it was told from somebody who'd already died from anorexia's point of view. She still didn't accept that she'd had a problem, so she was still very much in that frame of mind that food and weight was just not acceptable. It was harsh and it was difficult to read at times, but it was very insightful. As somebody who's never been in that frame of mind, it helped me understand what it's like for somebody who does suffer with that. And I think that's really important because that's the thing about mental health. We need people to understand what it's like for those who are going through it so that we can help them. So I don't think this is something that I'd have chosen personally to pick up and read, but I'm very glad that I did. It's definitely important and I feel like I've learned from it as well. So the next book I read in August is The Call from Padaro Gillen. This is my proof copy of the book, so the final cover does look a little bit different. I was lucky enough to take part in the blog tour for this book, so I got to interview the author on my blog, which I will leave a link to in the description in case you're interested in checking that out. This book is set in Ireland, but it's a couple of decades in the future. It's based around the Irish mythical fairies called the Sidhe. Centuries ago, the Irish banished the Sidhe to a land called the Grey Land, and it literally is the Grey Land. There is no colour there, and it's a horrible place to be banished to. So the Sidhe have been plotting revenge on the Irish for making them do that, and the time has come. A couple of decades earlier than the start of this book, the Sidhe cut Ireland off from the rest of the world. Planes that were going across at the time turned up empty, boats turned up empty, all the people had gone, nothing could get in or out of Ireland. And then teenagers started disappearing, leaving nothing but their clothes behind, and they would be gone for 3 minutes and 4 seconds. When they came back, the majority of them would be dead, and they had been twisted and tortured by the Sidhe. Basically, the Sidhe call these teenagers into their land, and whilst it's 3 minutes and 4 seconds in Ireland, in the Grey Land it's a whole day. And these teenagers arrive completely naked, nothing to defend themselves with, and they basically have to survive for this day. If they survive, then they make it back to Ireland, but most of the time they don't. And the Sidhe like to play with their victims when they catch them, so it's not a pleasant experience when somebody comes back after 3 minutes. This story focuses on a young girl named Nessa. She suffered from polio as a child, so she can't use her legs properly. She is at a survival college that all teenagers must attend to try and fight off the Sidhe when they are called, but no one really expects Nessa to survive. So the synopsis for this book sounded a little bit like a lot of stories I've read before. It's throwing teenagers in the face of death, but with a different twist. So going into it, I did expect quite a few cliches, and I got none of that at all. I have read lots of books that include teenagers and death, but I haven't read one that is as creepy and as twisted as this one. The Grey Land and the Sidhe in this book absolutely terrified me. You can just imagine what you would do if you were in that situation. Turning up at this strange, horrible, torturous land with nothing. It's a terrifying situation to be in, and the descriptions of what these teenagers were going through were so perfectly written. And I also love that it's about Irish mythology, because that's something that I don't really get to read about too often. So this ended up a pleasant surprise to me. Although it was an unpleasant read, I ended up loving it a lot more than I actually intended to, and I know it's going to have a sequel, and I'm very excited to see what happens next. The next book that I read is Wren, the Monster Inside the Monster by Sarah Noffke. This is the last book in Sarah's trilogy about Wren. I have mentioned the other two books on this channel before. I don't want to go into too much detail about the plot because of potential spoilers, but it follows on from where the second book left off. Wren has found out that his daughter, which he didn't know he had until recently, is actually pregnant with his grandchild. So whilst he's coming to terms with having a daughter, he's now going to be faced with being a grandfather. And because Wren isn't exactly a nice man, he doesn't react to this the way everybody else would. He's also struggling to overcome the problem that is Vivian. Vivian is a villain that we met briefly in the second book, but she plays a much bigger part in this one, and Wren has to find a way to deal with her and stop her from brainwashing America with one of her crazy ideas. So I always get nervous with final books in series because there are so many plots that you want tied up and you want everything to happen well. This one didn't disappoint. It tied everything up perfectly. I was very satisfied with the ending for all of the characters. And not only that, but we also got to see characters from some of Sarah's other series, which I was really happy about. So I really enjoyed reading this series. I think I've just loved it because it's been so different. The main character in this book isn't a nice person, and he's unapologetic about that. And I think that's what makes it so fascinating. So it's kind of bittersweet because I'm going to miss Wren a lot, but I'm happy with how it ended. So the final book that I read in August is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. This is a story that I've tried to read before, but it was when I was a lot younger, so I didn't really appreciate it. So I decided to come back to it. And I really loved it the second time around. I've said on this channel before that I don't often read classics, but I've been trying to read a few more lately. Virginia Woolf is one of the authors that I turn to when I decide to actually read classics. Mrs. Dalloway is literally set over the course of one day. Clarissa Dalloway is a woman in her 50s, and the story is based around her organising a party for that evening. So we start off early in the day when she's walking across one of the squares in London, and it just goes through different characters throughout that day. It's set in the 20s and it's after the war, so it deals with post-traumatic stress as well, because there is a character in the book that has fought in the war and he's not really dealing with that very well. And I just really love that side of the story because back then it wasn't really recognised. Mental health wasn't really talked about. So that side of the story was desperately sad. But it was also just really fascinating to see such a varied bunch of characters. It's definitely like nothing I read before, and I'm actually quite surprised at how much I did enjoy it. But yeah, I really loved it, and it's definitely got me back in the classics mood. So I'm going to go after some more classics after this. So they are the books that I have been reading throughout August. I've had a really good reading month because I've enjoyed everything that I've read, which is great. So as always, please do let me know down in the comments what you've been reading this month. Also, what you're planning to read throughout September. Let me know all the bookish things down there. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye!